Today we're going to talk about comparing and ordering fractions, decimals, and percents. So we have fractions like 3/5, decimals like 0.72, and percentages like 12%. And when we want to compare those or put them in order, it's really helpful to have them all be the same format. So they could all be fractions, or all be decimals, or all be percentages. In general, most people convert them all to decimals. And we've already talked about how to convert percents to decimals. And we've talked before about converting fractions to decimals, but let's talk about that real quick. Converting fractions to decimals, let's take our example of 3/5. And so that would be 3 divided by 5. And 3 divided by 5, we could do long division if we needed to. 3 goes inside, 5 waits outside. Decimal point is here. 5 does not go into 3. We append a 0. 5 goes into 36 times. Now I know some of you already knew that 3 divided by 5 was 0.6, but this is how we get 0.6. And we only need to go as far as we need to be able to compare these. But now we have 3/5 is 0.6, 0.72, and 0.12. And notice the decimal 0.72 has two places. The percent as a decimal has two places, but our fraction only has one. Let's go ahead and append a 0. So now they all have the same number of decimal places, and you can tell which one comes first really easily because they all have the same number of decimal places. So we're going to say 0.12 comes first, and then 0.60 comes second, and 0.72 comes next. See how easy that is when we make them all decimals and all have the same number of decimal places. But we're not quite done. The question asked us to put 3/5, 0.72, and 12% in order, and that means from least to greatest. And so we need to put them back in the original formats. So 0.12 was originally written as 12%, and 0.60 was originally written as 3/5, and 0.72 was originally written as 0.72. And so now, there they are in order from least to greatest. And that's really what we just need to do to put those in order from least to greatest, or even to compare them, because we now know that 12% is less than 3/5, and 3/5 is less than 0.72. And that means that 12% is less than 0.72. And then we could do the greater than versions of those as well. But we know what they are in order, so we know how we can compare them. Let's take a look at one more example. Let's say we had 5/7 and let's say 83% and 0.79. Again, we probably want to put these all in decimal form. So this one's already in decimal form. 83% is really easy to put in decimal form. We learned how to do that just the last section. And now we need 5/7. Well, that's not as easy, but that isn't too bad. We go 5 divided by 7. And we need to append a 0. That becomes 7. And we subtract 49, append a 0. And then notice how these are 2 decimal places each. We've got 2 decimal places on this one, 2 decimal places on this one. Well, let's go ahead and go 2 decimal places on the long division. 10, that would be 1 time. And is that enough to distinguish the 3? It is. That tells us that 0.71. We don't need to go any further because we know it is the least already. So we know 5/7 is the least, and then 0.79 is the next smallest number, and then 0.83, which is 83%, is the next. So notice we only did our decimals until we had the same number of decimal places as the one with the most number of decimal places. Let's try one more, make sure everybody knows what we're doing. And so let's say we have oops, that's not a pencil, 0.126, and then we have 0.2, and we have 10%, and then we have, say, 1/8. Well, there's 4 numbers there, but that's okay. We can still put those in order. And what we want to do is figure out which percentages these are. Which decimals these are and how many decimal places these are. Well, so this one has 3 decimal places. And looking at it, that looks like that's going to be the one that has the most decimal places. So let's convert 0.2 to have 3 decimal places. And 10% is 0.10. And let's append a 0, so it has 3 decimal places. And now we're going to take 1 divided by 8 and convert that into 3 decimal places, so we know how far to go. So we need to append a 0 here. That goes in 1 time. 2, bring down a 0. That goes in twice. Don't forget my decimal point there. 16. Well, gosh, still not quite enough to put those in order. And then 4, and then 0, and then 5. Well, that's 3 decimal places. I can stop. And it happens to be that I'm used up all the numbers, but 3 decimal places. And that tells me that that's going to be enough to distinguish it from the rest of them. And so we have 0.100 is the smallest. So we have 10%. And then we have, looks like 1/8 is the next one, because 0.125 would be the next. And then 0.126, which was just a decimal. And 0.2, which was also just a decimal. And there they are from least to greatest. And what we did was we found how many decimal places they all had, to make sure they all have the same number of decimal places, and then we made them all decimals. And we divide. That's the last thing we do, is divide, because we divide until we have the same number of decimal places as everything else. And then we can put them in order really easily. That's it.